Welcome, everyone, to Enlightened Masculinity podcast, where we talk about our opinions about what it is to be an enlightened masculine, mystical man in the modern urban societies of Earth, planet Earth. I wonder if we could do, cosmic enlightened masculinity, because I'm sure there's masculinity on Jupiter and in other solar systems, and enlightenment, that shouldn't be too much different. That'd be cool. We could talk about that one day on acid, maybe. And no, I'm just kidding. We don't do drugs here. We're all about, clear seeing, clear perception, and, having self-control and self-discipline. That being said, these are our opinions, so try them on for yourself. I am one of your hosts, Yogi Chris, PhD, travel the world teaching yoga, also author of many books and podcasts and many other things. You can find me in the description to this podcast, or if you're watching on Zoom or Facebook or Instagram, you know where my stuff is. So that being said, I'll hand it over to my other co-host, Akash Katakam. He's a bio-research analyst, or what was it? You work with drug dealers. Isn't that what we ascertained? You work with the biggest drug dealers in the world, actually. You investigate their drugs and make sure that they're up to par, and then if they are, then you invest in them. So that's a pretty high-end job, if I understand it correctly. You also are a registered yoga teacher on the side and forming your clan of yoga followers who are into certain esoteric practices, such as sunrise yoga and some sacred syntax, communication, things like this, which we may get into one day. If you guys got questions on that, then definitely send them in. So I'll hand it over to you, Akash. What's going on, brother?
Thanks, Yogi Chris. What's going on? Well, I've been realizing more and more to be more self-honest, and in every single little way. There's times where it's easy to fabricate a small little white lie to yourself, and how it's something that you may think is like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just a small little white lie. But I've realized how those can compound more and more. I was listening to a Brian Casella podcast the other day, actually, and he touched on this topic. And it really resonated with me, because I've definitely recognized and realized more and more some of these, some of the times that I do that to myself, and really there's no real reason as to why, because it doesn't help me, if that makes sense. I wanted to ask you, I guess, is have you recognized this within yourself, and how do you deal with it itself?
I don't really understand, little lies to myself.
Yeah, it could be something along the lines of, like you say, like you'll do something, whether it be for yourself or for someone else, and you agree to a particular location, time, etc., and you're not there, and you don't give them any communication beforehand, or it could be something along the lines of you decide that you're going to only act in a particular way, and time comes around and you deviate from that. Something along those lines, I guess.
Well, two things come to mind. One, the first example you said kind of reminds me of this podcast here, because you showed up late but didn't tell me that you're going to show up late. I don't know if that's what you had in mind when you were saying that, but I just always communicate. I just communicate. As soon as it comes into my mind, I communicate. It's very rare these days that even minutes will go by without me communicating. If I want to say something, I say something, or I figure out how to say it, or I even say, hey, I want to say something, but I don't know how to say it. I just start the saying, I start saying things. And the second thing, if I don't follow through on a commitment I made to myself, or some promise that I made someone else, again, it really comes down to the communication. I know I said I was going to do that, but I can't do that, or I'm not going to do that, or I don't have time to do that, or I'm not going to get it done when I said I was going to get it done. And if it was a commitment to yourself, it was too weak. It was weak. It was a weak commitment. If you don't follow through, that's like people telling me, how do you practice yoga every day? I'm just not disciplined. It's I don't even think about it. I think maybe I don't think I've ever made the commitment. I just do it because that's what I want to do. I don't I don't make a commitment to go out every night. I just do it because that's like part of me. And so there's that. So having a reference for the things in your life, contrasting it to the things in your life that you do follow through on. What's the difference? What's going on in your mind that's different about the things that you do follow through on? Well, it might be that you actually genuinely want to do them. So the things you're not following through on, find something in there that you actually want and focus on that, not on the punishment that will happen afterwards or, the consequences of not following through. I mean, that can be a motivator as like a fear component. Like you just get so you just so want to avoid the problem that you will do something. So how you frame it is up to you. But yeah, those are the things that kind of come to mind. I don't know. If we go deeper into it, maybe I can go deeper into it. If there was a specific example, or if you could say some more words about in detail, like what is it exactly? Maybe not the event per se, but like more describe what you mean.
Yeah, sure. So I'm bringing this up because this is something I recognize within myself. Let me take a second and root it up.
Definitely. We're all going to breathe while we wait. Everybody take deep breaths, slow and steady.
What's coming up is, I guess, like subtle times when you disrespect yourself or disrespect the self in general. When I say this, I mean, examples of it are like making a commitment, not following through on it, or saying both inwardly and outwardly that you'll do something, but not sticking to that commitment. I find it hard to believe that. Like, I think this is something that, or what I've experienced many people do in subtle ways. It's not necessarily like super overt with one particular, like with huge things. Like, I don't know, it could even be as small as like saying that you're going to pay like a bill on time and doing it like not on time or some such thing. And obviously there's penalties and stuff for that, but it's handling those, really breaking promises, breaking truths, breaking responsibilities. We all do this in one, in my opinion, at least I know with myself, I do this in one way, shape, or form. And I guess handling those, how do we handle those? Or how do you handle those?
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. First thing is, over time, just knowledge of cause and effect, you'll stop making promises that you're not going to follow through on. So it just reminds me kind of girls. Girls will say that I'll come, I'll be there, you'll see me, and you just kind of, you don't count on them. I, as a masculine, am the opposite of that. If I say it, count on me. But it's going to be hard as hell for you to get me to say it, because I know that when I say it, I'm going to follow through. So I'm very selective about what I say I'm going to do. And so you become more and more selective about what you say you're going to do. You'll get the opposite pole, the people that they never say they're going to do anything because they know they won't do it. So you're in the middle, right? And so there's that, being selective about what I say I'm going to do. Then when I disrespect myself, a lot of times when you said that, I don't know, tell me if this is, before I go further, tell me if this is kind of what you mean. This is what I saw in my experience in my mind when you said that. And it was, when disrespecting myself, a lot of times that manifests later as like I'm talking to myself a lot about what I could have done, what I should have done, what went wrong, why I went wrong, how I feel bad about it, how I wish it had gone differently. Like all of that uncontrolled self-talk after an event takes place is a clue that I am very not okay with how I communicated in that situation. Which generally, if I'm not okay with how I communicated, it's generally because it went against something that I'm trying to be. It went, like I was maybe angry, but I'm trying to be like a peaceful yogi. Or maybe I was beta and I was trying to be alpha. Or maybe I was passive and I was trying to be a businessman, And so I conflicted with who I was trying to be. And then later, my mind recognizes that and I'm tormenting myself with it. That's kind of the flavor of what I got when you said, disrespecting the self. Is that what you mean?
I'd say that's probably an effect of it, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's the effect that one would experience. The cause of it would be, I'm not sure what the cause is necessarily. I think it's probably just exposure, prior exposure and such.
Yeah. So what I would say is, you're right. You're noticing the effect. And a lot of times the cause is not illuminated. The effect illuminates that there was some cause that you were unaware of. You were unaware of that. And the negative feelings brings light to the fact that, you just contradicted, like there were some inner conflict or contradiction. And, so there's definitely like lots of alchemy you can do in those situations. There's beliefs that you're holding that are contrary to how you're consciously trying to be, or that went against how you reacted in a situation. Emotions are a funny thing. Like a lot of times you do a contradicting thing, or you compromise your integrity in a moment because it felt right. In that moment, it felt right. But then later when the feeling is gone, you're left with the conclusions of what actually happened. And you're like, shit, I wish I hadn't done that. And it's almost like the whole buyer's remorse kind of thing. You behaved in a way that felt right in the moment, but then afterwards you're like ashamed of it, or guilt or something. And so accessing that feeling, like, if you go back to, there's a podcast I did with Yuri that he had, a little bit of emotional breakdown kind of thing. And we went into, when was the first time you felt this? And what'd you say to yourself when you first felt this? And start going into those belief systems. And so the emotion can be a really instant access, because you as a masculine man, just through time, as in your personal evolution, you just uproot all of these limiting beliefs. And then you are just shining, because those beliefs are caging your inner light. And with words, they're just like an invisible force field. So when you have the guilt or the shame, you access when you formed this belief. By accessing the emotion, you find the sentences that have formed the belief. You start rewording your beliefs and freeing the inner light. And this is an antithesis to the feminine. The feminine is just more and more caged with conformity, because they're very social creatures. We're all social creatures, but female is a herd animal. Female goes with the herd. Female isn't a hunter, because the hunters go to war, and the female will just sit back and take the winner's side. That's the female, which is the sheep. The sheep will go with whichever farmer wins the fight. And the sheep could try to be the farmer, but it's going to be a gruesome battle if she tries to step up against, in that situation. So she is more and more contained and controlled. And you as the masculine man have, through your life, evaluated and assessed all of these beliefs that through engaging and interacting with so many situations in the world and so many different kinds of people, you really bring to the surface emotions that are the result of how you were believing the situation should go, your expectations and assumptions about how it should go. And when it doesn't go that way, then you realize that, I had an expectation here. When the negative feeling comes, that's a clue that I had an unspoken expectation about how it was supposed to go. And I just didn't voice it. So another added element to this is voice more your expectations. Learn to enter into a situation voicing expectations and assumptions. And now we're talking about masculinity, like when you're with a woman, it's not like I expect you to sleep with me. I expect you to make out with me at the end of this date kind of thing. But then that's something to reevaluate. Like, why would you expect that from her anyway? So you'll find all of these beliefs with the negative emotions that come after the fact, and you will one of two things will happen. One is you'll not be okay with the belief and you change it. Or two, you'll be okay with the belief, and that will resolve the emotion a little bit, because you'll realize, I'm actually okay feeling this way because I'm okay with this belief. In that situation, it's the process of relax the body, let the emotion flow, and immediately get back to survival activities. Immediately go back to survival activities. Make your list of things to do, start doing them, clean your house, clean your body, exercise, message a whole bunch of people, get on business, do some work, just do survival activities. and make time for your practice where you can go back and reassess your state of mind and then go back to your survival activity. The emotion has to flow, and start training your body to act even though. The warrior will go into battle even though emotionally he doesn't want to. The warrior will go on the hunt even though it's raining out and he doesn't want to. The feelings do not stop the warrior or the man from doing what needs to get done, because that he is the provider of survival. He is the provider of protection. He is just the provider of that. And that your emotion should not influence your survival activity. Now, it does sometimes, of course. So a little bit of compassion with yourself. We're on an evolution here, and you're a human too. You got an animal body. Sometimes the other night, Angie, I broke down. I felt so weak the other night. I uprooted some really, really insecurity. It was just childish, just nonsensical insecurity. Like I was paralyzed, Akash. You would not have recognized me and it was ridiculous. It was like 15 or 20 minutes. Like I was just like a pouty boy. It was ridiculous. And I almost took it out on my girlfriend, and I was like, this is not you. It's not your fault. This is me. There's something to me going on. And I think I talked about it yesterday. And I was like, and I encouraged her. I had enough wits in my mind. It was ridiculous. I'm so embarrassed about what happened, actually. But I had enough wits to be like, will you coach me through this kind of thing? In the same way that I coach you through things. Like, ask the right questions. Stop taking it personal. I'm not angry at you. I was like almost getting angry at her, but I'm like, I'm not angry at you. I just need you to talk to me in a certain way. Don't talk to me in the way that you're the victim here. Talk to me that you are the coach or something. And she did. And it slowly, helped in that element. So did you find any of that helpful? I'm not sure.
Yeah, for sure. And this is definitely something I'm going to revisit. I think multiple exposure I found in general, whether to any type of material, any type of ideas, is super, super important. The process that you were talking about, actually, I was recently listening to a Dianetics lecture, and it sounds very aligned with Dianetics from at least the process of understanding where an emotion came from and how to work with the minds to root out old limiting beliefs and such. So that was really, really interesting. I wanted to briefly touch upon yesterday what we talked about in regards to paradox, because it clarified a little bit more throughout the day and throughout the night. It's something that Vince Kelvin talks about, actually. I've realized it's called dual direction. I associate the word, instead of dual direction, I associate paradox. And so he has this phrase trademarked, and I think it's absolutely brilliant in general. But it's offering two ways of being at the same time that are opposite to each other. In other words, an example of something like this might be give me 1 second. Let's go to this, I don't know, let's go to the coffee shop, but I don't really have time for it right now, or some such thing along those lines. The idea being that you're offering one way of being and a contradictory way of being at the same time, but doesn't like the two of them can't exist together, if that makes sense. The reason why I wanted to bring this up was I found that it's very important to exist or to continue to bring these types of situations up if you want to experience newness or experience almost breakthroughs, if in some senses, of whether it be of to allow freedom to flow. It's when things don't necessarily make sense, and it cuts the mind out, and it starts allowing the body, the heart, the emotions to feel more, and the sexuality necessarily to flow more as well, because it cuts the mind out. It doesn't allow that connection of your minds to your heart, to your sexuality. It's really just amplifying the heart sexuality connection. I found this just super helpful throughout life, because it's in times like this that I'm actually able to understand more from the mind, believe it or not, later. It's like cutting it out for the particular moment in time and then coming back to it. So I wanted to revisit that very briefly because as I was doing the notes yesterday, it kind of came to me that that's what the concept was. I didn't realize it though. The other thing, Yogi Chris, I thought we could chat a little bit more about today was any practices, I guess, that you have that are other than meditation itself, that are like self-reflective. So this could be something along the lines of journaling or recording yourself in terms of like just a kind of like audio or video, like for yourself itself. And these are things that are never shared with people. And I think you alluded to it just prior to us getting on here. But could you talk through some of those types of experiences that you have in your everyday life, and if you do, and the importance of them for men?
Of self-reflective practices?
Yes.
Well, first I would say everything that I'm doing, there's a reflection. It's an interesting idea. I'm seeing this now for the first time, that my entire experience of life is reflected inside. That all that's happening around me is just reflected inside. I'm only aware of what's happening inside, and it's a reflection of the outside. So self-reflective is paying attention to what's going on. What are you thinking about? That's a reflection. Then it's very interesting, this idea of like self-reflection. The idea of self is like doesn't have matter, doesn't have energy, doesn't have form, so it has no reflection. But there is an extrusion or projection from the self, which is the mind, and in the mind is the reflection of the world around, and a lot of past reflections too. So a lot of the past reflections get mixed in with the present reflections, or the past reflections are contorted and with this tool called imagination projected into the future as if that's what's going to happen. But it's really just a bunch of reflections that get mixed up together. So self-reflective is like, pay attention to like, what are all these reflections coming up in the mind? And when am I not doing this? I don't even know. But there are, sitting, like meditation, sitting still, it makes it easier to notice the reflections as just reflections, because you start limiting the stimulation from the external environment. You stop playing music, you stop moving around, you stop doing things, you're sitting and doing nothing. And in that nothing doing, reflections keep coming up in the mind. It's like, where the fuck is this coming from? Like, I'm not doing anything. Why are reflections coming up in my mind? And so there's, clues there as to your conditioning and, why you have turbulent emotions and unpredictable states of mind. Because when you try to stop your mind doesn't stop. And that's a clue you're not in control of your mind. So self-reflective practices, everything I do, yeah, journaling is great. I have a list I dropped. I have a list of looping statements that I'm weeding out, and sometimes I'll look at my handwriting and I'll look at it. I think we talked about handwriting analysis yesterday. And so I'll check in with like kind of my state of mind there. Just everything I do, my whole communication, how am I doing everything I'm doing? How am I doing it? Like what's the mindset of me doing it? How am I driving? How am I listening to this music? How am I holding my face? How am I holding my breath right now? Like what thoughts am I holding as I'm interacting with the girl? Like, bad echo through your speakers, Akash, of Chris's voice. Well, that's cool. You get to hear me twice, though.
I'm actually muted, so I'm not sure. Maybe on
you're muted, so the mic doesn't come through, but then, but the sound is still going through. See, he's saying that my audio is coming through your speakers, and so he's hearing me twice. He's hearing me through my microphone, but then also the microphone on your phone. Yeah. So it's the self-reflective practice is just what is your attitude that you're holding on to while you're doing everything you're doing. And, practices for self-reflection. I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm like, what the fuck are practices for self-reflection? Like, what are some of your practices? Give me an example. You said journaling, but what do you mean by will you define this idea of self-reflection for me? Help me out. I'm struggling over here. You're muted on Zoom.
And now? Cool. Yeah, when I say self-reflective, what I'm referring to is times when you sit down, as you mentioned, in some way, shape, or form, or stand, whatever you want to do. And yeah, you start to analyze your mind, or you start to observe your mind and your past mind, as well as your future mind. So looking back on an experience, you're like, well, these are the things that I had done in this particular experience. These are ways that these are things that I want to drop from that experience and I don't want to have in my experience to date or moving forward. These are things that I want to continue and maintain. And then these are things that I want to really add to it, if you will. So that'd be like one way of going about it. Second way, I'd say, and all of this credit to Vince Kelvin in regards to check-in. This is kind of the concepts that I'm pulling from right here. The next part I'd say is the looking back at an experience, like looking back, really it's, I guess, looking back retrospectively as to this is what had happened to date. And interesting. Looking back as to what had happened to date, and then using that experience to guide how you want to move forward. It's important, I guess, I found that it's important to have some type of practices like this, because otherwise you're going to continue to do the same thing and you're never going to change and evolve. And if you want to evolve, I think, as I believe it was Arash said, or someone I know, you can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. That's just insanity. So part of the path, I believe, for anyone who's along the path of the enlightened masculine man is to continue to change and evolve and grow in ways and realizing old patterns that they've had that are no longer serving them. And when I say serving them, I mean, don't allow them to be their highest self or in that particular moment, because we always are growing towards it, but we're not necessarily in a particular moment to moment. We're not always that person. So that's what I'm referring to, I guess, by self-reflective.
Yeah, I think so much of what I do, I agree with everything you just said, and with what I was saying before that everything I do is self-reflective. And a thing that's really been coming up for me lately is looking at high-level people, actors, and I really like Donald Trump, Jordan Belfort, some just high achievers like that. Those are the ones I'm looking at. I'm sure there's many. And it's probably mostly in my imagination, but I start imagining, like, what's their mindset through the day? Like, they don't have time to drift. They don't have time to doubt themselves. Like, from when they wake up, they maybe got like 20 minutes for themselves, and then the whole day until they go to bed, people are hounding them for attention, hounding them for communication, hounding them for mindset, hounding them for tips, like just wanting their value. And they got to be on point all the time. There's no like 20 minutes of crumbling self-doubt that they have. There's, not second guessing themselves. And it's I'm probably, exaggerating their value a little bit. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's even beyond what I'm able to imagine. But it's like a few podcasts ago, you were asking me about feminine archetypes or masculine archetypes. I think we covered both. And, the archetype of a man, like a Genghis Khan or King Solomon or Andrew Carnegie or, Donald Trump, just any president of the United States, but definitely Donald Trump, because he's got all these businesses he's running while he's president. And it's like, man, like, they don't have time to doubt. It either works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, what works? And then just get rid of what doesn't work. And it's like, there's no attachment to what doesn't work. You just change. Like, the goal must be more heavy in your mind than anything else. And any obstacle is simply the path. That is all it is. The obstacle is the path, or there's a different path. And you just make decision. And so the self-reflection is, for me, I imagine like how would Donald Trump handle the situation? Or I go into different theological, mythological characters or superheroes or things like this. I'm like, how would this, or an animal, like how would a snake handle this, if this emotion right now? You know, how would Thanos from, the Avengers, how would Thanos think about my situation right now? And it just puts it in perspective. So that self-reflection, that brings about an awareness that I was reflecting the idea totally differently than another man would reflect the idea. And that's a clue that it's wrong. If it can change, then why am I holding to it? So these kinds of visualizations where I embody a different being and then look at my situation puts into perspective that, I may be holding things, as the kind of trendy saying says, I'm holding things that no longer serve me. They're not serving me, And how do you know that? Because you're not okay with them. If you're not okay with them, they're not serving you. So how do you change them? Well, just become somebody else. Just be somebody else. How do you be somebody else? Well, let go of who you were. How do you let go of who you were? Well, you start imagining different things. You're holding things in your head that are like a fingerprint of the gods. Your imagination is your fingerprint in divine space. What are you holding in your head? Change that. Change what you're thinking about. How do you do that? Just change everything. Listen to different music. Watch different videos. Change your attire. Change your clothing. Use different words. Pick up a different book. Close the book you're reading. If you're in a rut, stop reading that book. Read a different book. I don't know. Like, just change it all up. Totally reinvent your life. Move. I don't know. Buy a new car. Like, just start changing your environment, and your inner environment will change, because as a human, you're still somewhat like effect. Like, it would be nice to be complete cause. I think there are people that are complete cause, and as I climb my nervous system to that experience, I'm not looking for little band-aids. I'm not looking for little micro steps. I'm beyond that. When I learn handstands, I learn little tiny progressions to ease into the handstand so I stay safe and I stay comfortable. I don't hurt myself. But I'm done with that for my personal evolution. I want to leap. I want to hop. I want to jump. I want to just catapult. I want to rocket ship to the next level. Like, I'm tired of these small steps. You know what I'm saying? And so that's my perspective on that. I'm going to need to end Instagram, guys, and come back on. What was these questions? Who wins, Thanos or the big dude from the Justice League? I don't know. All right, I'm going to come back on. But we're still on Zoom. So I'll hand it over to you, Akash, if you got anything else.
Yeah, many things actually came up from that little bit right there, and I think that was pure gold right there, Yogi Chris. So a couple things. One, I was at the Wharton Healthcare Conference. It's basically industry conference for the healthcare industry. And when I say healthcare, I mean traditional healthcare. It's funny because they didn't have any alternative medicine or anything like that, or no alternative healthcare, if you will, in that regard. So it's like interesting. But it's also run by a bunch of suits and such, which I found kind of interesting. But what came to me was the whole concept of the conference itself was disrupting the status quo in healthcare. And so how can you disrupt something if you continue to do the same thing, right? That's like kind of what we're saying here. And exactly what you're saying in regards to, well, change the way you fundamentally do things. So it could even be, how do you move in a different way than everyone else does? How are you breathing? Breathe in a different way than everyone else does. How do you eat in a different way? So do things at the most fundamental level in different ways than others. And that changes your state of being and your state of mind, right? If you start moving like an old man, you'll start getting into the sense of like, oh, this is what it's like to be an old man. And so on and so forth. It's really, if we want to make these like leaps and bounds types of changes that you're referring to, it starts with questioning our most fundamental like practices or ways of being. So important. So that's one thing that came out. I thought that was brilliant, the way that you went through an exact process around it. So we'll definitely review that, and I think that there's a little clip right there for you itself, as Dr. Ace alluded to. The other thing that had come up while you were talking about this is in the scenario, like what happens in the scenarios when we're able to make a huge change all of a sudden. For example, one day, I remember I was able to do my like shoulder stand like perfectly, and it wasn't like that. Like I was struggling with it a little bit beforehand, but just one day, bam, out of nowhere, it was just like really, really good shoulder stand or some such thing. How is it that, I mean, yes, it's a lot of the small little pieces that build up to it, but at some point there comes a time where everything that all the small little pieces that you've done have added up to you achieving a posture, getting into the at least relating to yoga right now, getting into a posture that's perfect, if you will, or is the perfect expression of the posture and pose itself. What happens in that one particular moment when you're able to express the posture in its highest form? What are we doing, or what is it that's ongoing, whether it be in the mind, body, what have you, that allows for this? So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I'm trying to understand the question, really. The question is, what happens when you perfect a pose?
What happens, yeah, within the mind, or why is it that, like, okay, every single day up to a certain day, you're not able to get the pose, and then the next day, something happens and you get the pose?
All right. Well, two things, because I don't know, I'm on this thing where I'm like, two things, three things, 5 steps to the outcomes you desire. So two things come up. Angelica understands this. That's Dr. Ace. Anybody on my silent flute training group gets one of the things I'm going to say. But I'm going to save that for the second. First thing I'll say is, a lot of it's muscle memory. The body just remembers things. It fits into place easier. Sometimes inflammation decreases in the joints, so you get that little extra degree of range of motion, which, because it's a lever arm, 1 degree change in the shoulder joint over here becomes an inch or two. When the hand gets to a different place, bone stacking, like so many little micro things, because you definitely feel it if you take a few days off of yoga, or you eat an especially large meal, or you try to do yoga at a different time of day, and you're like, wow, I'm not as mobile, or you do a different practice in a different temperature. Like, there's so many variables to getting it. And then the technical progressions of, like, easing into a posture or a new thing, yes, there is a huge influence over your state of mind, the story you're telling yourself. What are you saying to yourself before you try this thing? What are you saying to yourself chronically throughout that day? What's your mood of the day? What did you eat the day before? How did you wake up? Like, what are the conversations that you had that day? Like, your day affects your yoga. And so, yeah, all of those things add up, definitely. Benefits add up. So that's kind of the first idea. The second idea is just take this on. This is part, the Ashtanga philosophy, which my brand is Ninth Limb Yoga. And we'll probably kind of wrap it up with this, and then I think we have a question online. Some questions. Ninth Limb Yoga is about communicating the 8 limbs. It's all communication and imagination, what goes into that ninth limb. You could almost say the ninth limb is 2 parts. It's communication and imagination. And I'll refine exactly what that is. The original definition of the ninth limb was to put the first 8 limbs into action, or to share the 8 limbs. 8 limbs is a very ancient philosophy. It's called Ashtanga, is the philosophy of it. Ashta means 8, Anga means limb. It's the 8 limb path to yoga. And it's a mental philosophy. In the mental philosophy of it, you have all these different tenets, some ethical precepts and posture, breathing, concentration, meditation, absorption. Sense withdrawal is in there too. And so posture is one of the limbs. One of the 8 limbs is posture. Posture is, if you've ever heard, like in a debate, when people are debating, they're like, what's your position on this matter? Position is posture. So your mental position is your posture. Your posture is not a physical posture. Your posture is your state of mind. This is the 3rd limb of yoga, is your state of mind. The animate posture around your state of mind, that's cool. That's cool. You want to correct that in a way so that it doesn't inhibit or limit or influence negatively or agitate your state of mind. And all the rest is just circus. It's a hobby. I like bending my body. I rationalize that it's going to benefit me in the future as I age. It's going to be harder to get more flexible as I get older, though. muscles get harder. The connective tissue gets harder. It crystallizes. It doesn't bend as much. Some joints in your body will fuse, literally. They'll fuse. Your xiphoid process will fuse to your sternum. A lot of your spinal joints will fuse eventually. So, but you can prolong that not happening through proper diet and mobilization now. So it's future casting. I am preparing my body for a happy transition into death. And the rest of it is circus. It feels good. It feels good, expanding my breath. And then there are the minor benefits are what it has on my mind. It's nice to be able to sit up straight when I meditate. It's nice to be able to take full, deep breaths without, pockets of tension around my rib cage that inhibit my breath. A fuller, deeper breath means I can get to that outcome faster. The outcome being free up my mind, free up the clutter in my nervous system, so I can think more clearly in straight lines. So posture is a mental posture. And so that being said, that means no matter what the external expression of the posture, you can achieve the maximum benefit. There is no perfecting a posture externally. It's impossible. The most basic posture is standing straight up. There is no perfecting that posture. Try it. You'll keep getting better and better at it. I've been doing it a long time. And at least to the extent that I have a teacher, his name is David Garrigues. He lives in Philadelphia, and sort of. He travels the world a lot now. He's in his late 50s. He's been doing Ashtanga yoga for 35 years or so. And his ideas are there is no perfecting the posture on the outside. Don't try. The most basic postures, just that you repeat over and over, like in the Ashtanga system, you do downward dog pose like 1 billion times. There is no perfecting downward dog. Stop trying to perfect it. There is no perfect handstand. It's pretty close. You can get closer and closer and closer. And it's an admirable thing. I love pursuing perfection because then my mind and my attention is on perfection. And perfection is in the mind anyway. Just the idea of perfection. The body is just always changing. Your electrons are always moving. Like even if you found perfection, just a split second later, it's gone because it changes. And so, yeah, just try that on. Try that on in your yoga teaching. Try that on in your yoga practice. The perfect posture is the perfect mental posture. Posture is a mental practice.
Awesome, Yogi Chris. I figure we get to a couple questions like you had mentioned a bit earlier, and then we start closing. So let's see. A couple things. Our words are made so we can describe things we know, but I remember from my childhood that to understand some of these words, I had to literally imagine something that was not in my world at all, like concepts of failure. Not a question, just a note to your previous idea. It's fascinating how these illusions were created in us just through vocabulary. Yeah. I'm not seeing any questions on this chat right now either, simply comments. So I figure we go to closing then, Yogi Chris.
Yeah, I want to comment on this thing. Men, exclusive, not a question, just note to your previous idea. It's fascinating how these illusions were created in us just through vocabulary. Illusions are not just created through vocabulary. All of your senses create the illusions in your mind. It's not just vocabulary. I don't even know what illusions were. Do you know what illusions he's talking about? Cool picture though for your Instagram.
No, I'm not entirely clear. It seems, yeah, I'm not entirely clear. I wouldn't want to put words into his mouth.
Vocabulary can create illusions. Like I could say, pretend you're in a desert and there's trees and there's a lake and then there's an eagle flying. Like I can create an illusion in your head. Can you elaborate on the senses illusion?
I think what he means is the how illusions are created by all senses.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you an illusion is a picture in your head. How is that words? How is that vocabulary? Have you ever felt spiders crawling on you and you looked and it wasn't there? That was a feeling. There was no vocabulary there. Have you ever heard something that wasn't there? That was an auditory illusion. Right? I mean, there was no vocabulary there. So you can hallucinate, and I mean, there's probably a subtle difference in the definition of like what's an illusion versus a hallucination. I think there's probably pretty similar. So yeah, anytime that you see something that's not there, or feel something that's not there, or hear something that's not there, or smell something that's not there, or taste something that's not there, it's an illusion. And ultimately, as Angelica knows, and anybody in the Silent Flute knows, and we go deep into this, into, Monday nights we give lectures on this sort of thing. And by we, I mean I. And, all is an illusion. Right now is an illusion. Like, prove to me this is happening. Prove to me that I'm even talking to Akash right now. What if it was a really sophisticated computer simulation program? Like, everything you're experiencing is inside, and inside vanishes, and you change it in time. You ever play the game of telephone, and you like tell it over and over, and then it changes over time? Your memories keep changing because they're not real. They're illusions. Everything you think about is an illusion. That's why I just don't take my mind that seriously. Like, it's a clue to my past. It's a clue to my innate tendencies. I can do things with that. It's a access point to the robot circuitry and the robot program. But in the end, it's just a big fat illusion. And I don't want to take an illusion seriously. Vocabulary, just put words to it. It puts words to it so you can codify it, and then you can change it more easily. It's more discrete. Words make discrete. Akash knows because he got sound code. Words make more discrete the amorphic experiences of life. So it just cuts up more blurry lines into definite lines. And then you can rearrange, then you can transmit ideas to other people more easily. So vocabulary just expresses the infinite in finite chunks. There's the definition. So that's that part. Cool. So I'll hand it over to Akash for any closing statements.
Yes, closing statements on my end are: make sure to sign up for the Facebook group. We will be putting out content during the week, at least once, potentially twice. This could be anything from practices, whether it be in yoga itself, actually, mental exercises, brief lecture on a topic of interest. We focus on helping the modern enlightened man to achieve this state through health, wealth, relationships, and spirituality, empowering them up. So any way that we can provide some value to you in this regard, more than happy to. And yeah, that's all I have for right now. So Yogi Chris, I'll turn it back over to you. I know you have a couple really, really interesting products out right now. Definitely been picking up as many as possible because I get the amount of value that I get from them is it's absolutely incredible. Sound code itself was just how you codified a lot of the teachings and distilled more than anything. I think your biggest value add is you research so much. I mean, that's part of a PhD, is going through a lot of different pieces of research and distilling down what are the most important ideas, and shortening it to the one sentence that someone spent a whole lecture on, if you will. But that one sentence, the way you've structured it grammatically, and such, it infuses all of the pieces that you need to unlock the next, to unlock a piece to the puzzle, if you will. So absolutely incredible. I love that you were able to put sound code, which I know has been hours, like thousands of hours of work, into about an hour, maybe 2 hours of content. Has been absolutely incredible. So turn it over to you of any products that you have, because I'm always super excited about them.
Yeah, and I appreciate hearing that. That people, not to stroke my own dick or whatever, but it is helpful to kind of spell out what I'm doing, because then I can do it better. Like, I'm always soliciting at the end of my yoga classes what people's experiences are, because I know it makes it real for them, and then I get this like genuine feedback that will help me update, modify my methods, and so on. And I remember two things come to mind. Somebody in one of my lectures, I have this testimonial, actually, it's on my YouTube. It was Andreas. He was like, he says this, he has like his German accent, I can't really mimic it, but he's like, I like how you just basically said the same idea like a whole bunch of different times. Like the whole lecture was just, you said the same idea over and over and over from a bunch of different perspectives. It's like, it really made it clear for me, like I get it now. And because I say it one perspective and like these two people get it, but the rest don't get it. And I say another perspective and then they get it, but they don't get it. And then I keep saying it from different perspectives, which is what? Like saying it in different scenarios, with slightly different language, with a different attitude, or even it might just be as simple as say it and then back out, talk about something else, and then say it again and then back out and talk about something else, and say it again. And eventually it like the subconscious recognizes the pattern and they get it. And then another student, this is the last story, is she's like, I'm starting to get what she did is, it was a bunch of money. The silent flute is going up in price. It's $157 a month now. And she also bought private lessons on top of that as part of her training. And so she really dove in. When people pay more, they pay more attention. And that's what I want, because I can really benefit a person if they pay attention. If they don't pay attention, I can't do shit. And so she really just dove into the archive of lectures. And she watched like a lecture a day for like 10 days or something. And at the end, she sends me a message. I was like, how's it going? How's your training? And she's like, I'm starting to see a pattern of how you lecture. And no one had ever said that to me before. And I was like, well, what's the pattern? I'm wondering, what do you see? And she got a little hesitant because I think she thought that I thought that she was like insulting me or something. And I was like, no. I just want to, I am in it. I don't really rewatch my own lectures. So tell me, what do you see? What pattern are you seeing? She's like, well, I see how you like start off with a key point, and then you tell a story, and then you go into somehow like 30 or 45 minutes into the lecture, you come back around to the original key point. And it's like, now we get it. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I didn't know that's what I was doing. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much there. If you're watching this, you understand I have an online training program. That's how I make a lot of my money. And that's, it's instant transformation. Like, it's transformation. If you like how I talk, if you hear the stories I tell, if you like the mentality and the techniques that I give, which I don't really give many techniques on the podcast, then go to untitled.com. Check out. It's in the link in the description underneath this. For free, I've given away a writing, which is the 99 teachings from the No Fucks podcast, a 4-page document. And, you can message me about that link. I'll put the link up on my Instagram after this. It's a donation. You can donate. Some people have donated, but a lot of people just take it for free. And that's great. The podcast is free that Arash gives, so I'm giving away the writing for free. And so check that out. The Silent Flute book is out right now. Yuri Verbishchuk donated the highest with $6.66. So now I raised the price. It's $6.66. I highly, highly recommend get my book. It's only, if you're unsure about $157 investment with me, get the 25-page book. If you will experience transformation from reading words on a page, and that it'll benefit you tremendously. Plus, if you're on a budget, I mean, if you can't afford $666 for some life-changing material, then I don't think you should listen to this podcast right now. I think you should go get a job. I think you should go mow some lawns or shovel some snow or go wash some dishes or something. That should be in your bank account. So that's what I'll have to say. We'll do this again next week. I appreciate everybody showing up. I appreciate you, Akash. I see you more of a contemporary than as my student. And but I very much appreciate the inquisitive vibe that you bring. Maybe it's my narcissism or my ego or something, but I like answering questions. I feel as if I can really extract more value from myself when I put on the hat of teacher. And so I appreciate the vulnerability of talking about what you're going through and asking questions about it. And so I just wanted to say that. And so 12 p.m. every day, we go back to Science and Spiritual Growth on weekdays. Join our private group, Enlightened Masculinity. We'll give you some free value on the weekdays. And I'll see you next time.